Thank God. It's all over. Except, unlike my celebration to the conclusion of the 50 Shades trilogy, this movie is not even worth a party blower. Not even a moment of silence. It gets nothing. Well, I mean, except a review from yours truly, of course. Look, many of you following me pretty much already know my thoughts about the first Venom. It's exactly how Venom himself would describe it.
Like a turd in the wind.
I hated it with every fiber of my being, and the only thing that saved this abomination from being the worst movie of 2018 was the fact that Eli Roth's punishing, insulting remake of an underrated gem came out in the exact same year. Everything about this movie was an unmitigated disaster, and having rewatched it again in preparation for the, hopefully, final chapter, my arguments have not been swayed. Tom Hardy was woefully, hideously miscast as Eddie Brock. It was rife with award-nominated actors phoning in their piss-poor performances while having to deliver some of the most appalling dialogue imaginable. The villain forgettable and moronic, the action scenes were mind-numbing, the CGI for Venom and the symbiotes were totally disgusting. Eminem's theme song was about as cringe as Fall Out Boy's remix of the Ghostbusters theme, and the Venom character himself was much more annoying than a climate change protester.
How dare you!
Now the sequel, Let There Be Carnage, was actually a bit of an improvement over the turd-flavored ice cream that was Venom 1. That being said, it absolutely sucked. Attempting to go for more of a romantic comedy route on top of being your bog-standard superhero action film, it was anything but hilarious, and it didn't even attempt to fix any of the issues that I had with the original film. Judging by my prior reactions to the last two movies, I'm not even gonna waste anybody's time by saying that Venom: The Last Dance is a total piece of crap. For anybody who thought that this concluding chapter would be at least a mediocre effort by Sony themselves, I hate to break it to you, but this movie isn't even worth attaining a below average score. This movie is just straight pain and torture and misery, start to finish. Maybe not as annoying as Borderlands or Garfield the movie, but geez, this boil on the butt cheek is so narratively agonizing to sit through. It still amazes me that we're at 3 movies since 2018 and that this whole film was written by human beings and not aliens from outer space. Come to think of it, aliens would probably do a much better job compared to the director who wrote the last Venom movies and 50 Shades of Grey. We follow ex-journalist Eddie Brock and the walking ear cancer that is Venom in the country of Mexico. The Dunst duo are on the run after the events of Let There Be Carnage because they are seen as the primary suspect for the murder of Detective Patrick Mulligan, upon discovering that they've made international headline news. This makes it clear for the both of them that no matter how far they tread, they will not stop hunting them no matter what, and that it's a life's gambit if they ever try to go back to the United States to claim their innocence. So what's their plan? They decide to travel to New York to blackmail the judge who banished him so he can clear his name. Give me a second real quick. Sorry. So, they embark to their destination. However, they realize that they're also being hunted by xenophages, a breed of indestructible extraterrestrials that were sent down by Null, the creator of all symbiotes, to scour the galaxy in order to retrieve the Codex, a key that will free him from his prison of darkness so he can conquer and annihilate the cosmos. Turns out the key is inside Eddie and Venom because Venom combined with Eddie after he died, supposedly in the first movie, and only unveils itself once they combine together. This leaves Eddie and Venom in quite the pickle. How will they survive the oncoming forces pursuing them? Will sacrifices have to be made? But I think the best question would have to be, how bad is this movie? Okay, you want to know the best part about this movie? Okay, actually 2 best parts about this movie. I'll tell ya. Number 1, the end credits. Number 2, Chiwetel Ejiofor is acting his ass off in this. No matter what material it is, whether it's a B-grade popcorn flick, an awards contender, or a piece of crap like this, he never gives up his commitment to the character and delivers the right level of over-the-top without turning into a flat-out cartoon. Now, about the rest of the flick. And of course, we're gonna talk about the movie's script first, because this story emphatically defines laziness. The entire script is infested with coincidences and conveniences, all mingled up into scenes in order to tell its story. No matter what happens, luck will always be on the hero's side. Lucky for Eddie and Venom that they would snatch onto the outside of an airplane without being caught by authorities or airport personnel. Lucky Eddie and Venom found a horse in the middle of nowhere so they can use it to travel faster. Lucky Eddie and Venom find a family in the middle of nowhere. Well, I mean, actually it's the Spring Mountains, but it might as well be the middle of nowhere. So they can drive them all the way to Las Vegas. Cause and effect is nowhere to be seen. Everything is handed to Eddie and Venom on a silver platter so they can continue on with their survival. The thing that also blows my mind is the fact that while both Eddie and Venom are on the run, they make no concerted effort to conceal their identity or watch out for security cameras. What's the matter, Venom? You can telepathically sense when a drone is about to strike Eddie? Memorize entire wall carvings of Cletus Cassidy's cell without having to go inside of it? To inform Eddie clues about where Cletus hid the bodies? But you can't sense that there are any security cameras around or even try to disguise him? They don't even attempt to steal upper clothing like a hoodie from one of the gang members, which is right freaking there! But they did steal a pair of cowboy boots because we need to keep on this running gag about Eddie losing his shoes. God, this just reminds me of that tiresome running gag in Venom 1 where Venom does not like it when he gets called a parasite. However, that isn't the worst example that itemizes the sheer stupidity of the two. The real tomfoolery is when both Eddie and Venom go to Vegas. When Eddie and Venom try to go inside of the Paris Hotel casino, they steal a tuxedo from a drunk man pissing on the hotel bushes. Because in order to get inside, you need to follow a dress code. This after him assaulting a hotel staff member, and nobody saw it happen. Okay, I've been to the Paris Hotel. I've been inside of the casino. It's at the very front of the hotel. There is no specific dress code to get inside. The reason why this is happening is because the filmmakers decide to throw in a scene of comedy and, let me tell ya, it wasn't funny. After wasting their precious $20 on a slot machine, really? You could have just used the craps machine? I made like almost $1,000 off of that thing. Mother of all coincidences, they meet up with recurring character from the past two Venom films, Mrs. Chin. They meet up, they hug it out, and she allows Eddie to spend the rest of the night at her suite. Now, what happens next is perhaps the dumbest moment in the entire trilogy. Remember the xenophages? In the movie, Venom explicitly tells this to Venom that the only way that the xenophages can track down Venom is if Eddie and Venom are in their full form, which unveils the codex. Doing so sends a signal to the xenophages, allowing it to super sprint to wherever it is. So what happens is Mrs. Chan asks for Eddie and Venom to dance. Venom gets excited and forces Eddie to dance with Miss Chan in full form, which causes the xenophage to traverse across Nevada at Mach speed all the way to Mrs. Chen's hotel room. As these two are in a life or death situation, after telling Eddie explicitly about the ramifications of turning into the form which they're not supposed to turn into, Venom just decides not to care and allow the creature to put Eddie and Mrs. Chen's life in danger. This isn't comedy gold. This is Venom acting completely out of character and ignoring the consequences just so we can have a comedic scene of Venom dancing to ABBA's Dancing Queen. You know, for a duo that call themselves the Lethal Protector, they do a poor job protecting people. Even subplots and moments of character development are not surveyed in the slightest. One of them is the fact that Eddie has a psychological meltdown of the fact that he kills a soldier in self-defense without using his symbiotic powers. All of it is glossed over a seconds-long conversation, and it is never brought up again. Would it just kill the movie to have Eddie be a three-dimensional character instead of an awkward, hunky journalist for once? Second, there's this shadow military organization that gets introduced in an attempt to world build the universe. that is forgotten about minutes later. And the third one is a moment of character growth, or lack thereof, in which Dr. Payne is dealing with the trauma of losing her brother from a lightning strike. And if you watch the movie, you would know that both of them should be dead. And it is a giant waste of time. It's just something that shows up to make a half-assed attempt to give Dr. Payne any dimension to draw sympathy from the audience. And when the film eventually brings it up at the last act of the movie, there's no instance of evolution in her character for her to make that sacrifice to help people. It's practically the illusion of character development. For acting, I give him my compliments to Chiwetel Ejiofor. Conversely, the opposite applies to Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock. Now look, Tom Hardy is a brilliant actor whenever he's given material that isn't this. Ever since he was casted to be this hotshot reporter in Venom 1, he has been outlandishly horrific. And it sucks even worse when he can't even present any level of charisma to carry himself with such a poorly written character who has to spout some ghastly dialogue. One of my most undeniable issues with Tom Hardy in this movie, a lot like his performance in Let There Be Carnage, is that he isn't an actor that is capable of comedic timing. When the film pitches a joke or a punchline in a scene, he can't authentically execute it in a way to make the audience giggle or relate to him. It's all stale, flat, and he doesn't know how to properly land the end of a joke in order for the audience to laugh. But his on-screen acting is not as cancerous as his vocal performance for the symbiote Venom. I have never understood it back in 2018 as to why the filmmakers and Tom Hardy decided to voice Venom this way, but it's just about as irritating as having a thorn in your side. When there is a scene of character development or an instance of drama, you cannot take it seriously because the character has to go out of its way to spout a one-liner or a crass joke that you just want him to just simply shut up. And yeah, I know, I'm complaining a lot about Venom. So let's complain some more about the movie's antagonist, Null. Of all the Spider-Man villains Sony has conjured in their money-making franchise, Null has to be one of the most worthless villains in the subgenre. He's a do-nothing character who basically sits on his throne for all of eternity as his lackeys do everything for him. And there's things about his stupid, nonsensical motivation that begs one to ask. If Null is sending his xenophages across the galaxy in order to find the symbiote that has the Codex, which just so happens to be Venom and Eddie, why are the xenophages trying to kill him? Venom states that if Eddie or Venom dies, then the Codex dies, which means that Null would end up in his prison for all of eternity. Don't they need Venom alive in order to extract the Codex so they can free Null from his prison? In fact, the detective who died in the second movie combines with the symbiote named Toxin. Wouldn't it be also a convenient backup plan for Null so that way they can extract the Codex from him? But enough about the terrible plot. Why don't we talk about the CGI? Look guys, pointing out how hideous the design for Venom is like pointing out how hideous Madonna is post-plastic surgery. Everybody knows this. It was phony looking and ugly back then, and it still is now. But he isn't the only symbiote to look like a big slab of expired pudding, for we have more symbiotes, and they look just as terrible. The textures and overall design for the symbiotes are disgusting, and the compositing wouldn't look any better in an early 2000s superhero movie. The same equally goes for the generic uninspired xenophages and the overall design of Clintar, Null's dark place of imprisonment. And finally, the action scenes, with what very few there are entirely boring. There's not an action scene that harbors any kind of suspense, and a lot of them play out exactly as you think they would. Like the final climax in which Venom and his symbiotic friends take on a xenophage in a gigantic, explosive CGI fest that would make directors like Michael Bay proud. It's basically like the failed version of Shazam, in which you have characters that you don't really care about acquire symbiotic forms and superpowers. One is similar to the Fantastic Four's The Thing. The other one has fire powers, which doesn't make any sense because symbiotes are allergic to fire. And they all have difficulty finding one xenophage. However, later on in the movie, Venom is able to handle 5 xenophages all on his own. Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. But the action scene gets a whole lot worse when you realize that the xenophage has an incredibly overpowered weapon that they can use to incapacitate the symbiotes. And when one does it, it's like, you couldn't have done that the whole freaking time? Do you realize how many times that the movie would be over if the xenophages were to enact that exact attack on Venom? Let's just wrap this up. On to the final verdict. Venom: The Last Dance is like a road trip in which you are surrounded by some of the most annoying people imaginable as you travel from one state to another. And by one state to another, I mean Washington all the way to Maine. No matter how many times you would try to block their annoyance or ignore the rambunctiousness, you realize that it was never going to stop until you reach the finish line. It's obnoxious, it's aggressively unfunny, it doesn't make any sense on any fundamental level of storytelling, and the only saving grace aside from Chiwetel Ejiofor's performance is that I would never have to see this version of Venom for the rest of my days. It's like the Christmas gift I've always wanted, and Santa Claus just now managed to give me this gracious present early. My name is Luke Nukem, and to Sony's version of Venom, as they say in Italy, arrivederci!